Hi guys, welcome to the second part of today's Roleplay Thursday. I'm just going to be doing a quick overview of the player's handbook. Just to give you a rough idea of what's in it and a few tips on perhaps how to use it. It starts as you'd expect with the introduction, which basically covers what D&D is and some of the basic concepts like rolling dice. But it's well written and actually not bad at all. It also covers the core concepts of an adventure and various bits and pieces like that, which is quite good. Then you got part one, which is character creation, arguably the most important part of D&D, and as you can pretty much tell by the fact that it takes up, crikey, adventuring, casting spells, banishment, la 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 la. Yeah, that much of the book. Oh no, tell a lie, that's inspiration. So where are we? Yep. No. There you go. No, that's equipment. That counts as building a character. Virtual castle. Yeah, that much of the book. Slightly less, but still, the vast majority of the book. Looking at about 2/3 of the book in just how to build a character, which makes sense because it's probably the most important part of the book. The first part of it is races. They call them races, but really it's more species. You've got various species that you can play, and each species has what's called racial traits, basically advantages or disadvantages in the rules of those species. For example, the first species you encounter is dwarf. They're down to earth, they're stalwart, and they're reliable. And where are we? A dwarf, just by being a dwarf, you get a constitution increase of 2. Dwarves are tougher. Now, with each race, you'll have a subdivision, with the exception of humans. For example, dwarves, again, you have hill dwarves and mountain dwarfs. I know you probably can't see that much on the screen, but to give you an idea, again, hill dwarf gets +1 wisdom and an increase in toughness, whereas a mountain dwarf gets a strength score +2 and has proficiency in medium and light armor. Sorry, not an increase in toughness, an increase in the amount of wounds it gets for a hill dwarf. Which allows you to basically tailor it to what you like. Each race has those things, and each race has a brief description of how that race acts and that race's tendencies. That being said, it's perfectly acceptable to look at that and go in completely the opposite direction. A lot of people do that. It is a slightly more difficult way of role-playing. As a DM, I would tend to not advise against it, but certainly caution players that if they take a race and go the opposite way to the way that race is built, it might be trickier to roleplay for them. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Providing yourself with roleplaying challenges is a good chunk of roleplaying. The second part of character building is classes. Classes, there's some beautiful artwork there. Classes is basically your job. There's multiple classes. You'll find that several classes overlap with each other in several areas. For example, a barbarian has some overlap with a rogue. They're both outdoorsmen, they're both good at survival, and a rogue has some overlap with... Sorry, a barbarian has some overlap with a ranger, They're both outdoorsman good at survival, and the ranger has some overlap with the rogue. They're both sneaky. They both tend to rely more on cunning and skills to do their damage, and so on and so forth. Also, you'll find that some guys can do the jobs of others, even though they don't overlap. For example, wizards have several spells which will allow them to detect traps, and they have several spells which will allow them to heal, meaning a wizard can do the job of a rogue if you don't have one, or the job of a cleric if you don't have one. They won't do it as well as either a rogue or a cleric will, but that's really down to party balance. I'll just do a quick word on party balance. When building a party, there's several positions you'll want to consider filling. There's the traditional meat shield, that's someone who can take damage. The traditional damage dealer, that's someone who can deal damage. Sometimes they're the same person, sometimes they're different. There's the healer, someone that gets the party up after they're down, an essential part of the party. And then there tends to be the skill monkey, someone who can deal with non-combat situations, such as finding and disarming traps. And finally, there tends to be the social bunny. The social bunny is the person that loves to talk and likes to deal with the social situations. Anybody can do that particular part of the job, but having the actual charisma to back it up is very useful. So in party balance, you want to consider what you're going to do to cover all those areas and what classes and even races you're going to play, so that you have a good spread of skills and can deal with any particular situation. Of course, you don't have to do that. Again, you can all focus on one area, go one way, and hope that works. If you're going to do that, again, work with your DM. You need to know what it is that he wants to roll and he wants to run with before you do anything particularly going off in one direction or particularly limiting yourself. Where are we? That's martial arts, that's sorcerers. Yeah. Next part's personality and background. That covers several bits and pieces. You've got bits, for example, that cover the height and weight of your character. You can just make it up, but it will give you, it's got a randomization chart. You've got physical characteristics for you to think about and how they might affect you. It covers the alignment, which is something I'm going to go to in a lot more depth when I do a video purely about character creation. You've got languages. It covers inspiration, which is a way of the DM rewarding you for good roleplay. He gives you an inspiration point, which you then cash in at a later point. He can only ever give you one, so whilst I don't recommend just spending them willy-nilly, there's no point hoarding them. It also goes over ideals, bonds, and flaws, which are part of the background. The background is quite a new, but I don't know if it was in 4th ed. It certainly wasn't in 3rd ed, but you pick a background appropriate to character, appropriate to your class. For example, if you are a cleric, you might pick the first background in an acolyte, and it gives you tables on which you can roll for personality traits. It also gives you your additional skill proficiencies additional languages and some equipment that you're naturally going to start with. You can, if you want, choose to ignore this, choose to work it certain ways. You can choose, instead of rolling on the tables, to build your character personally and specifically the way you want to do it. However, I do find rolling on the tables is good. To give you an example, on the personality traits, the first personality trait, it's got 8 options here, and you roll a d8 to pick one. But the first one is, I idolize a particular hero of my faith and constantly refer to that person's deeds and example. Wanting to be another character is actually a great character. The fact that your character is constantly aspiring to be as good as that person, to be as pure or as strong, or maybe even as evil. If you're playing an evil game, you can aspire to be the worst person in the world. Whatever, it gives your character immediately a character, something they can focus on, and something that the player can really take take to heart and run with. Obviously, you've then got the rules section of the book. Obviously you've then got the equipment section of the book, which is vitally important. Knowing how your characters are equipped, what weapons they've got, what they've got access to is massively important. Some people run high equipment games, some people run low equipment games, some people run games where you can pick up anything you want whenever you want. Other people run games where you really have to work just to find extra arrows. It has some descriptions of what those things do and how they can affect the game. And again, beautiful, fantastic artwork that we've come to expect from Wizards of the Coast. It also has things like the costs of food, drink and lodging and things like that, just so you can figure out roughly the costs of basically existing in a world. You may have gold, but that gold will be worn out day after day, week after week. Or maybe it won't. A lot of people ignore the day-to-day costs because they just don't want to handle the bookkeeping. I find them to be quite useful. We got to Chapter 6, Customization Options. That includes things like multi-classing requisites, experience points, hit points and hit dice, and how to spend them. It also includes It also includes multi-classing proficiencies and efficiencies you gain, and one of the bits we're all probably looking for, the feats. It gives you the feats, tells you what the feats are and how they can affect you. There's only a couple of pages of feats, nowhere near as deep as, for example, Third Ed was. However, there are other books that come with feats, which increases that. Part 2, playing the game. This is the rules. It gives you the rules on how to roll dice, how to use abilities. It gives you ideas on ability classes, what are difficult. It uses things like a DC, which is a difficulty class. Every ability check rolls in a difficult class. An easy ability check would be a low number, 5 or lower, and a difficult one would be a medium one rather would be 15 or thereabouts, and a nearly impossible one will be 30. Just for those who haven't played, basically you roll a d20, you add a number based on your skill to that, and whatever that number equals is your ability check. Your ability check number then has to be compared to a difficulty class. If you beat that difficulty class, you do the thing you want to do. If you don't beat that difficulty class, you don't do the thing you want to do. So that's the basic fundamentals of 90% of D&D, but it gives you an idea of using abilities and what skills you can combine with those abilities. We then move on to, what skills do you combine those abilities, and saving those in bits and pieces like that. We then move on to the adventuring part. Again, another fantastic piece of artwork from Wizards of the Coast. This covers all your basics like time, movement, speed, considering things like if it takes 6 days to go north to get to a city and then 4 days to go west to get to a city, it then doesn't take a day to get back to where you were. It includes travel paces, how you calculate things you can do whilst you're traveling, adventuring, the environment, how it might challenge your adventurers, planning food and water and things like that. Resting, it also includes the rules for long rest and short rest, which are vital. You'll repeatedly see refreshers after a short rest or regained after a long rest written next to abilities, so that's something you need to think about and understand. It also goes through downtime activities. We then have chapter 9, combat, the meat. This is the bit that everybody wants to know. This is the bit that a lot of your players will be reading again and again and again, or a lot of you players, if your players are reading it again. This is how you fight monsters. This is how you kill monsters. It has several abilities, including dash, charge, and dodge, that you can use to influence your combat. Part 3, rules of magic. If you're a wizard or a magic user, and I love playing wizards, this is the best part of the book. It contains how magic works. It also contains all your spells, all the wacky and funky things you can do. It contains a nice little diagram there, which is possibly one of the best diagrams I've seen. Explain the difference between line, cone, cube, sphere, and cylinder. Sorry, having a bit of Tourette's issue, just bear with that. A lot of your spells will be affected by whether they come out as a sphere or a line. One of my personal favourites from a low level is Flaming Hand. Comes out in a cone of fire from your hand and basically makes you a human flamethrower. But it'll give you an idea how each of those works. Chapter 11, spells. Look, all the cool lists of spells. Here, you basically got a list of every spell and what level it is, going from cantrips to 9th level spells. Your cantrip is the level 0 spell. It's the lowest level spell you can get, but it does have the advantage in this issue that it hasn't had in some of the previous issues, that cantrips can be used in infinite amount of times. There's something you constantly use. A wizard can always, make a light, regardless. Whereas anything above cantrip level, you can only use a certain number of times depending on your class and how your class is constructed. It then also divides them into druid spells, paladin spells, ranger spells, sorcerer spells, and tells you which classes have access to which spells. We then move on from that to the pages that are stuck together. Honestly, I haven't been doing anything disgusting. Spell descriptions. Your spell descriptions tell you what each spell does, how much damage it does, or what effect that spell has. They also have what level, what school of magic it's come from, the casting time, the range, the components you use, and the duration of the spell. Some people will keep track of components fastidiously, reminding wizards that, no, you used up your last Eye of Newt and there are no Newts for 100 miles, you can't cast that spell anymore. Others will go, yeah, you've got a bag with all your general spell components in. I'll give you a rough idea when it runs out. And again, both those ways are valid, both those ways are cool. There are a lot of pages upon pages of spell descriptions here. And personally, I wouldn't have it any other way. Then after that, we have the appendices. The first appendices covers conditions. That's actually a very useful one to read, particularly if you're a DM, as a lot of the conditions can affect play. It can allow you to take a player out of combat without killing them, simply by blinding them or deafening them. So those conditions each have a specific, again, probably go into those in more detail later. Then you've got lists of things like deities and other bits and pieces, which are useful for character creation. If you are a cleric, you'll want to know who the deities are. If you are a warlock, you might want to know who the evil gods and the dark ones and the non-humanities and things like that you might make deals with are. There's not a lot of detail on them in this book, but you can go into them. You can look them up online. There's plenty of wikis, and a lot of these deities are public domain at this point because they were written in the original D&D or the older D&Ds, which were much more open domain. A lot of them, however, are specifically the copyrighted property of Wizards of the Coast, so I wouldn't go around nicking them. It also covers some real-world deities, such as the Celtic deities, the Greek deities, the Egyptian and Norse deities. I always think it's a bit iffy using real deities because there are some people who still believe in these particular deities, and you don't really want to cause offence. But that's up to you, provided your players are okay with it, you're fine with it. It's got the planes of existence and various other bits and pieces, and all kinds of useful information in the appendices section. Then you move on, almost finally, to the creature statistics. If you've got a wizard, or if you've got any class that has an animal companion, these are where you will find the base stat upon which you can base your animal companion, so that's useful to have. Finally, you've got the character sheet, possibly the most important part. This part is photocopyable. You can photocopy it from the book. Wizard of the Coast have given their permission. That's what it's for. You don't have to tear it out, and please don't tear it out. I've actually seen people do that, where they tear the pages out of the book. It's just painful to see. If you don't want to go the old-fashioned way of photocopying the back of the book, Wizards of the Coast website has a load of cool stuff on it, including character sheets and including other races and other bits and pieces that you can play. I totally advise going and looking at their website. They've got a lot of support. They're very pro this game because it makes them money. Okie dokie, I hope to see you guys next week when I'll be going into more detail on how to create a character. I'll be running through some of the strengths and weaknesses of the various classes and looking at how they combine well with races and how necessarily they might not. And basically things like how to guide your players, or if you're a player, good ideas for you when building characters. Okay, thanks very much. Bye. Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Or you can head over to my Patreon page and support me directly. Remember, it's your support that allows me to do this. Until next time, see you around.